Live, the weekly show for men who are thinking about, going through, or recovering from divorce. Today we're going to talk about that question, should I get divorced? Welcome back to the show. My name is John Knocklinger. I am the head coach of Divorce Shield, the only company exclusively devoted to helping men plan for and navigate divorce. You can find out more about us at thedivorceshield.com. My guest today is Kim Bowen. She is the owner and founder of The Marriage Place in Richardson, Texas. It's a place that helps couples decide which direction they want to go in life. Thank you for being here today, Kim.
Thanks, John. Fun to be here.
Great. So I just want to start by asking you what it is you do at The Marriage Place.
Well, we do a lot of things. We have a staff of counselors and coaches, which means we can work with people outside of the state of Texas. So we actually have clients internationally. And depending on what the client wants, we can help people save a marriage. We can help them strengthen and improve a marriage. We help people who are trying to decide if they want to work on the marriage. Maybe they're not sure. Some people are struggling with whether it's time to call it quits or not. But we also work with a client who is wanting to save a marriage whose spouse isn't interested. And, they've already decided they want out. And so helping them possibly turn that dynamic around if it's possible. So.
All right. So do you usually have two people that come in together, or is it usually one person that contacts you and then you have to decide whether or not the other person's going to come along?
Well, I guess most of the time it's two people coming in together, but we sure do get a lot of one, individual person, even to save the marriage. I had a client one time whose husband worked for the government in a high profile job, and he didn't want it on his record that he'd ever been to a counseling office. And she came and we worked on her marriage with just her, and it had great results. So
that's interesting. So you do some counseling with just a single person to help them save their marriage. How is that different from when you have both of them there together?
Well, it's a lot less refereeing if they, if they're really a hostile couple. For us, our approach to helping couples, whether you're together or alone in the office, is trying to get you to focus on your part in this and your contribution to everything that's going well and everything that is not going well. And so because we take that approach, we can work with just one person, because that's really the only person that can change is you, right? So that's the only person we actually need to have. And depending on the choices that you make and the way that you respond to your spouse, oftentimes will change your spouse.
Interesting. So, think some of what you're talking about almost sounds like just marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. I know that you're also helping people decide which fork in the road they're going to take. Are they going to save their marriage and work on it? Or are they going to get divorced? So is there a difference between that kind of discussion that you're having with people versus marriage counseling? Or are they really the same thing by two different names?
Very different. So marriage counseling is an effort to actually save the marriage. And so we are all on the same team with the same goal. As therapists and coaches, we're very pro-marriage. And so what that means is we don't put anybody's individual happiness or satisfaction above the marriage. So we're fighting for the marriage. When it's discernment counseling, it is not marriage counseling at all, because we work really hard not to be biased toward working on the marriage, right? Because you've got three options with discernment counseling. You're either going to leave things the way they are, you're going to move toward divorce, or you're going to move to at least a 6-month commitment of all-out efforts to work on the marriage. And our job isn't to change your mind, it's to help you make up your mind, right? So we come at that from a whole different place. Marriage counseling is oftentimes a commitment for 3 to 6 months or longer, depending on your situation. For discernment counseling, it's no more than 5 sessions. And so each session you decide if you're ready to make your decision and stop, or if you need to come back for another one, up to 5.
And then what happens after the 5th one if there's still no decision to be made?
We fire them, shove them out the door. We're really good about helping them not be stuck. And some people, though, they really don't want to make any choice because they don't like any of the choices, right? And if we get to where we really can't shift from that place, then no decision is a decision. And that decision is we're going to have a holding space. We're just going to hold space. But what is better about that is before you're kind of going back and forth, vacillating. Should I go? Should I stay? Your spouse is going nuts. Are they going to stay? Are they going to go? And if you give yourself a holding space, you're giving it's like a pressure release valve. You're giving yourself time and permission to slow things down and to take a longer look.
Interesting. So how often is it that you talk to people in discernment counseling where really both of them really want a divorce, but it's almost like an Old West shoot off where they're just waiting to see which one of them pulls the gun first? I mean, I don't like to use that analogy, but I think you understand what I'm asking. It's, how often is it they just both really want it, but they're just waiting for the other one to say it first?
It's not predominant. Most of the time one's leaning in, one's leaning out. When I get them like that, what you're describing, I think they both don't want to work on it. They want to move to a divorce, but they don't want it to get ugly. And so they're trying to come at this from a place of, more dignity and respect. And we just want to make an intentional choice, but we want it to be good for our kids, or we want it to be good for our families. And we just want to do this the right way. We get that too.
So if you've decided, or people have decided that they want to get divorced, do you offer any other services for that couple in terms of how maybe to proceed where they can do it in a way where it won't be, War of the Roses type of thing, where you try to encourage them to work together, particularly if they have children or whatnot?
Yes. And so if it is local, if it's somebody in Texas, we have connections with therapists lawyers who do collaborative divorce. And so we would highly encourage that, because a collaborative divorce, just that whole process, is a lot less damaging than 2 attorneys who are duking it out. If it's not in Texas, if it's a client not in Texas, we can't really recommend anybody, but we can explain the process and tell them what to look for when they're looking for an attorney. Because, you probably know this, how expensive it can be to have 2 opposing counsel going at each other and just damaging all the things that are said and brought up and trying to hurt each other and win something. And we take the analogy that if somebody wins, everybody loses.
I think that's a really good analogy.
It is. And if they want to move toward divorce, then we can help them with co-parenting issues. We can help them as they're processing through the divorce, even with a collaborative attorney. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. And that's something that's really, really good for people to hear, that they can come in, and even if the ultimate result is you end up getting divorced, it's not all bad news.
Right.
They'll find a way to work together. And I think that's a wonderful message. So how often do people come in and they really need discernment counseling and they cannot get their spouse to participate in the process?
That happens. Again, discernment counseling in its purest form works best with 2 people. It's a very structured process. But that's why I'm writing a course. I mentioned to you before we hopped on here today that is just for one person who's kind of wanting to get some clarity. Should I stay or should I go? And it's really a educational, thoughtful process to be self-reflective, to understand where it went off, your part in it, what you did to make it harder for you to make certain decisions, or what you thought, or how you responded or reacted. Not that it's your fault that the marriage is where it is, but we all participate, right? We all have our participation trophies. And so it just kind of helps clear the fog. Because what we find is that if you don't do this work of understanding, it's kind of like a forensic evaluation of the relationship. We go back to the past, we look at the present, and we look at the future. And if you don't do that, people often come back to me and say they have a lot of regrets. They wish they had worked harder at their marriage, or they wish they had tried harder, or they wish they'd left sooner. And if they don't do the work too, you tend to take yourself everywhere you go, and you're going to find oftentimes the same type of person in a different package. And you're going to be the same type of person. I mean, dynamics repeat. It's really amazing how, somebody said once, you show me the thumbprint and I'll show you the thumb. And it's true. It's like, I can ask you 15 minutes of questions and tell you so much about your relationship in your life, not because I know you, but because of patterns.
Yeah. So you started the marriage place because you had your marriage almost ended in divorce. Is that right?
It did. Yeah.
So how did that lead you to really understand these issues and bring you to the place where you wanted to have the marriage place?
Well, my marriage should never have ended. And I got to be honest, I used to say most, I still think most marriages shouldn't end. They're just not, people have not done the hard work of looking inward enough. And they're buying into the notion and the idea that you fall into love and you fall out of love. And nothing is scarier to me than the idea that can you imagine going into business with somebody, a partner, and you put all your money into this company, and your partner might just wake up one day and go, I don't feel like coming into work today. It's on you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's how marriage works. It takes two people to decide to create a marriage and one to end it. And so it's a gamble. And in my marriage situation, I had gotten so unhappy for so long that I fell into the common traps we see. And I went into this one-up position where my husband had to do all the changing, and I was actually doing pretty well, and I deserved better, and I was going to find better, and kind of really disgusting view of myself now when I look back, but I'd gotten into that place. And when we went to look for help, I wasn't really interested in it. I didn't really want to participate. And we could not find a good therapist or good counselor who knew what they were doing, who could help us. And we tried several, and I was so frustrated by that. And so when we actually did work through the things pretty much on our own, I realized I want to change this. I want to train people to do this and to do it well, to know what they're doing. And I want to put a different message out there for everybody else too, that relationships and love, it is so much more than you're feeling in the moment.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I like that. It's interesting. As a divorce attorney, people have this perception that we all root for people's marriages to end. Yeah. And really what it is once they've decided that their marriage is over, they need help doing that. Is discernment counseling something that's a relatively new kind of counseling, or has it really been around for a long time, maybe in a different name?
It was created by Bill Doherty in Minnesota. He is a therapist there who's also a researcher, and he created the discernment counseling process. It's probably been around, 10 years, maybe. It's growing and expanding. They're getting a lot more organized and savvy in their presentation and making it available for trainings. So we're hoping more and more people learn about it. But it's been around for a little bit, and we're just trying to spread the news.
Do you find that most of the people that end up in discernment counseling in your office are very religious people, or do you find that that really doesn't have anything to do with whether or not they want to come in and decide whether or not their marriage should be saved?
Yeah, I don't think it's slanted that way, that people are religious. I think for those people, it's harder to decide to leave because so many religions have a very negative view of divorce, right? And so they feel guilty if they decide to leave, oftentimes. But no, lots of people come in. I mean, it's a big decision. You've got to untangle so much of your finances, your investments, your future, the way that you're going to take care of yourself and live, your children. I mean, it's blowing up a family and the extended family and friends. I mean, it's a huge decision. So I hope a lot of people are thoughtful about it. Although I did read a statistic the other day that said 80% of the people who file for divorce never tried counseling. I mean, that's just heartbreaking to me. But then again, my husband and I tried and didn't get any help. So maybe it wasn't such a bad option for them, but we're trying to do it differently.
Yeah, I think finding counseling and finding therapy is difficult these days.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's just, because I know a lot of clients have told me they've tried to find a therapist or a marriage counselor and haven't been able to find anybody. I don't know if it's just more difficult to find people that do this online. I mean, it wasn't hard to find you online. You have a beautiful website that really explains what your company does in so much detail. But I think a lot of therapists, they just don't really have that kind of presence. It's not really easy to find people. And unless you know somebody who happens to know a therapist, it's really difficult. But I do think it's great that you do this nationwide and worldwide. So anyone who's listening really can find you. But why do you think that therapy has become so much more difficult for people to find access to? I mean, you experienced it yourself.
It wasn't that I was having trouble finding therapists. It was that I was having trouble finding good ones. So most therapists, all of us, are trained to be individual therapists, right? We have one class on marriage and family, just one in all those years. Just one. And then we call ourselves marriage experts when we put two people on a couch. And it doesn't work that way. And so I think you can find them pretty easily, but it's finding those who are really good at what they do. I think since COVID, more and more therapists are doing online and Zoom. We've been doing it for years that way so that we could service clients outside of our area, our local area. My staff, I have such a passion for this that, we're only required to get 23 or 24 hours of CEU or continuing education credits in a 2-year period. Mine train for an hour and a half every week with some of the best in the business. And so, I'm determined that we're going to do it differently. We're going to do it well.
How many therapists do you have on staff?
I have 9 therapists now and 5 coaches.
So what is the difference between a therapist and a coach in your office?
Well, that's a great question. Therapists are, we're licensed by the state. We're trained in treating mental disorders and personality disorders. In marriage counseling and trauma, is mostly, one of the things people tell me that they love about us is they go to a counselor and their counselor doesn't really give advice. They just listen. And they tell them, how do you feel about that? They don't really suggest. And really, we're trained not to. Don't give advice. It's your client's job. Yours is just to shine a light. Well, we give advice. We give a lot of advice because we're directive. And so even our counseling is more like coaching. So the coaches have the same exact training as the counselors do, but they're not limited by the state health board to only practice in the state of Texas. But they have the same training and background. They cannot and will not work with a client who is suicidal or has personality or emotional disorders without them seeing a therapist outside. So that's basically the difference. If I get a client in my office and there's severe childhood trauma, or there's an addiction, or there's, something else going on, I can treat all of that in the room. A coach can only deal with the marriage issues, and they would have to transfer that other part out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, coaching usually is dealing with the here and now and moving forward, and therapy a lot of times is looking back and trying to understand why things are where they are now. I think that's a really interesting dynamic. When people call in, do you decide based on the intake that these are people that need a therapist versus a coach? Or do you have to do a little bit of, do you have to actually have them in for a session before you decide which person would be best for this particular couple?
Well, if they're outside of the state of Texas, we know we can't work with them as a therapist, right? So then what we do is we do an intake to make sure that what we can help them with is what they need, right? Mm-hmm. And if we find out that there's something else going on or something deeper, then we'll either work with them with conditions, like you need a therapist and we need to have contact with that therapist to make sure that that area is being treated and not by us, or we'll just tell them that this isn't a good fit. If it's in the state, our intake forms are really detailed. We get a lot from that so that we don't waste so much session time. The therapist is well prepared before that person gets in the room with all of this information. And if we find out that that's not a good fit, then we would either not see them or refer them to somebody who can help them. But that doesn't happen very often when it's actually, therapy.
Is any of this covered by insurance, or is it all just private pay?
It depends on how you code it. We're private pay. We will help you with the receipts to turn it into your insurance. Now, coaching insurance is not going to pay anything for coaching. But oftentimes your FSA or FHA or whatever all these are, you can use those to pay for your services. But as far as your insurance coverage, it's out of network for therapy and you'd have to file. We don't want to have to make a diagnosis. I mean, sometimes when you're working with couples and one of them has a personality disorder, you don't want to have to diagnose, well, your spouse does have borderline personality disorder. Because now we've just blown it up, right? Because everything is now, she's borderline, so we don't really have to work on me. So we just don't want to do that. And we don't want to be confined to the insurance company's stringent rules that are getting more and more ridiculous. So.
Well, Kim, if you were in my office, you would find out that every one of the wives is bipolar and every one of the husbands is narcissistic.
Narcissistic. That is such the buzzword, isn't it?
It is. I don't understand why everyone's using it all the time. And you ask someone, what does it mean? And you get like non-specific answers. Well, they just care about themselves. I'm like,
yeah. They're just selfish.
They're just selfish. And bipolar, usually that just means they think, they yell too much or they
have mood swings. Yeah. What they don't know is all of us have narcissistic tendencies. It's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very few people actually have true narcissistic personality disorder to a toxic level, a really toxic level. So
I find a lot of people don't want to go to therapy because they're scared of finding out that maybe they have an issue.
Yeah. I think so.
And that's just so difficult. So, okay, so we have discernment counseling. So what are the three options that people have whenever you get to the end, whether it's they've made the decision on, sessions 2 or 3, or you're at session 5 and you're like, make a decision or we're done.
Right. And you make a decision every session, remember?
Okay. Yeah.
And so you have the decision to stay where you are and leave things the way they are. And we'll talk in a minute about why that is a good viable option for some. For some, that's not a great option. They just don't want to make a decision, and we try to help them get unstuck. You have the option of moving toward divorce, and then it is how to get your partner to accept that that's where you are and to begin the process of untangling and finding the right legal help to do that in a way that is, like I said, respectful and as healthy as possible. Or to try to work on the relationship. And oftentimes what we ask is that they take divorce off the table for 6 months, just 6 months of completely take it off the table, and an all out roll your sleeves up and let's figure out if we can turn this boat around. We basically say either you're going to move toward divorce, you're going to divorce your spouse or divorce your marriage. We're either going to build a new marriage or we're going to walk out of the marriage. So
in those 6 months, what happens? Is there some kind of structure?
Depending on what is the problem, what is the reason that the marriage got to where it's at right now? Was it abuse or addiction? Was it somebody had affairs? If it's affair recovery, that's a whole different animal, because now you've got to have a lot of healing and forgiveness and working through triggers and finding out even if you can come to a place of forgiveness and reconciliation. So it depends on what they're dealing with. So while discernment counseling can be very structured in how we do the process, after that, it's an art. It's like the therapist or the coach dealing with whatever shows up.
How often do you think it needs to be structured? I mean, do a lot of people need the structure, or do you feel like that's not really necessary in a lot of cases?
For discernment or for therapy or coaching? Yes, you need the structure. Absolutely. Because you're both in crisis, basically. You've got one leaning out and one usually leaning in. And the one leaning in is anxious, sometimes desperate, and they're doing all the wrong things. They're either blowing up, why can't you love me, and guilting the person, or they're, I'll kill myself if you leave me, kind of stuff that goes on. And so we try to get in there and stop all of that damaging behavior that's not going to help anybody in this process.
So at the end of those 6 months, do they come back to you, or is the hope that after the 6 months they've made the decision on their own?
You're talking about if they now the 6 months is if they choose to work on it,
right? If they choose to work on it, and then after 6 months, did they have
to reevaluate?
Okay, so they agree that they're going to come back after 6 months.
Well, hopefully they're still with us. If we're doing the discernment, then we're doing the counseling after, hopefully. And so we'll work it. And then at the end of the 6 months, we're like, okay, let's reevaluate. Now we're back to you have your 3 options. Do you want to stay where you are, keep working at it? Do you want to move toward divorce?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And can they continue on? Do we have any people that continue on for an additional period of time where they continue to work on it and they want to come back, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's the longest you've had someone sort of in this process before they've actually made a decision about what they're going to do?
Well, we've had several. I mean, you have some that even though they've committed to 6 months, call it quits after 6 weeks. They're like, this is harder than I thought. I don't want to do this. Yeah. We try really hard to discourage that, but they do. Most of them are ready. At the end of the 5 days, I got to tell you, most choose to work on the marriage just because they haven't really looked at themselves and the relationship. And so they see that when they come in, they're like, I didn't even realize that how that much was missing to the story. So they want to know more. So probably, but it's, probably 55, 60% choose to work on it. Probably 40% choose divorce, and probably, the difference is the ones that say we want to stay where we are for now.
And I'm interested in that little group because I'm trying to do the math in my head. It sounds like a very small percentage.
It is a small percentage because, like I said, I don't like that group for most. So if the reason you're stuck is because you don't want to make a decision, right? For most. And so I try really hard not to let that be a cop-out for them. But for some people, okay, so let's say this. Let's say your partner, you just found out, has been seeing prostitutes for a year or so. You're devastated. You're worried about your health. Did he bring something home, or did she bring something home to me? Can I even trust this person again? I mean, your whole life is shifted. That's probably not a good time to decide if you want to work on the marriage or go for divorce. Because you might need some time, most people would, to figure out, can I even open myself up to this person to work on it? Like, do I even want to be vulnerable after that kind of betrayal? Can I forgive? And we don't, I don't like people that rush into decisions, permanent, deep, impactful decisions when they're in a trauma state, because your brain's not fully functioning. You're not fully thinking through some things. So for those people, leaving things where they are right now is exactly where they need to be.
Interesting. Okay, so if there's trauma, if they're in a trauma state, that would be a good idea for them. Are there other types of people that really are not good candidates for discernment therapy or discernment counseling, I should say?
Yes, you do not want to do discernment counseling where there is any kind of severe abuse or untreated addiction. One, the person who is abused doesn't have agency always to make that kind of decision safely. So we don't want to put them in that kind of position. If you're married to somebody who is in some kind of addiction cycle and they're not willing to work on it or treat it, I'm like, my concern is getting them safe. You need to leave the situation and get safe. And then we'll worry about, what might come next. But that's not a marriage I want to put back together, because it's not healthy to be with somebody who's not willing to look at their stuff. So yeah, those are the people that aren't worth it. We've even had court order. They are legally required to separate, to not have contact. What do y'all call that? I can't think, my brain's not working, but
restraining order.
Restraining orders.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll come in and try to do counseling with a restraining order. And we're like, no, no, not going to work. Not going to work.
So trauma and abuse and addictions. What about just people that have certain mentality about what life's going to be like after divorce? Is there any if someone has an idea about what life's going to be like after divorce, is there anything out there that would lead you to not believe that someone like that should be going through this?
No, those are the ones I want. I want to get my hands on them because there's three basic, we look for three divorce narratives. So the first one is divorce would be freedom. And these are the people who, kind of like where I was, they're in this one-up position. They're fantasizing about life outside of marriage with this person. Whether they actually have an affair, they often do have an affair on the side, whether it's emotional or physical, or they fantasize about what the ideal mate would look like, which is where I was. I'm just going to have, John Q over here, and he's going to make a lot of money, and he's going to be buff, and he's going to be smart, and he's going to be funny, and my life's going to be better. Those are the people I really want because they don't have a realistic picture of their marriage that they're leaving or the life they're heading into. So I kind of want to, not that I want to bust their bubble, but I just want to bring them down to reality, of what's likely to happen. Then there are those where marriage is a relief. And those are the ones whose spouse is controlling, angry, walking on eggshells. They are, oftentimes I have one who is a pleaser, and she's married, or he is married to somebody who is we call them vacillators, but there's somebody who's very reactive. And so the pleaser will often get small in the relationship while the person who's getting really big and loud calls all the shots, right? For that person to leave, that would be a relief. Because it would be like, I just want to be in a house where I can be myself. I just want to be able to breathe and not worry about he or she coming home and blowing something up, or having a big conflict. I want to work with those too, because I want to teach them how to have a voice. I mean, you can have all of that in the marriage you have if I've got two people who are willing to look at their stuff. The thing is, the person without the voice is always convinced that their spouse will not do the work. But it's amazing what the threat of divorce will do for that person.
Mm-hmm.
We call that leverage. And that will get somebody's attention really quick. And then that third divorce narrative, they're the ones that I would be okay, not necessarily. I mean, their discernment process is going to be much easier, but they're the ones who they know that divorce is going to be hard. They have thought about it. They are grieving it. They're worried about it. They're more solemn and intentional, but they just feel like it's their only option. And we just want to help them explore to see, is it really your only option? And it may be, it may very well be. So I'm looking for those three types of narratives when I'm looking for a candidate for discernment counseling.
You can see the passion you have for this, Kim.
I do. I so do. I really do. So many marriages end that don't need to. And, the family unit is the fabric of our society. And I truly believe that's why we're seeing so much of the problems that we're having is that, our families are not intact. They're not healthy. And the ones that are intact aren't healthy. So
what is the impact on just the way society's changed on marriages from your perspective? And what I mean by that is the fact that we've become much more isolated from other people in our lives, even people in our own home. People are constantly on their phones, on social media, not paying attention to other people in their house. How much of that have you seen contributing to the problems that are showing up in your office? So
much. I mean, when I was young and first married, we did premarital counseling. And the guy that did it, the therapist, he's like, everybody fights about in-laws, sex, and money. Well, I did some research on that, and now they're fighting about money, sex, and how much time you spend on your phone. I mean, it really has changed the dynamic. And it's so easy to feel like, my husband and I had a big argument about this just the other day because we're sitting there in the den, we're watching a movie together, and I'm crocheting and I'm watching a movie and he's in his phone. And I'm like, you're not present. And he's like, I'm here. The TV's on, I'm here. And you're doing that. So why can't I be in my phone if you're doing that? And I'm like, well, it's different because I know what's going on the TV and I can look at you and ask you a question and you go, huh? Because you're not present. You're in your phone. And so being able to have that discussion and get people to connect, to really connect. Sometimes I tell my husband, I want you to listen with your whole face. I don't want you to cut your eyes at me, and I don't want you to go, yeah, I want you to listen with your whole face. He thinks I'm therapizing him, but.
Oh, I love that saying. That's okay. I'm always accused of lawyering all the time. So
yes.
Okay. Me. Well, I'm really concerned too about kids these days, and the fact that they're not having the same personal relationships that we all had when we were younger. Like, I'm wondering how it's going to impact their marriages. It's going to be a whole different generation with a bunch of different problems than the rest of us have because they're used to interacting electronically with each other.
Yes, and I'll tell you a story. This was shocking to me. I didn't expect this. So I have two boys. One is an extrovert and never met a stranger, and the other one is an introvert, and he warms up to people slowly. They both went to the same college. The extrovert immediately, found his tribe and, created his life circle, his community. The other one struggled. And I asked him why, I'm like, are you not just walking up and meeting people? He goes, do you know how hard it is to meet people who are always in their phone? Like before you'd walk by somebody and it might be, oh, hey, and that would at least start a conversation. And he said, now, everybody's like this and it's like, don't bother me. So it's happening. And these people are losing the ability and the art of having any kind of relationship. I call it relational. They're not relational. We're not relational anymore. We're not available for that. And what else worries me, and this isn't on topic, but I just feel like I have to say it, is because of the internet, because of the way how isolated we are, porn is becoming a huge problem now for for boys and girls, right? And that's destroying relationships. So it's just, there's a lot to be concerned about. There's a lot of good things from all of this, technology and the way that we use it, but there's things to be concerned about.
I'm so curious how this is going to change your counseling that you're doing over the coming years.
Me too.
I mean, it's gonna probably change it in all kinds of unexpected ways.
Yeah.
So I have one more question for you about the types of people that come into your office. Do you find any connection between the reasons that their marriage is in trouble, for example, an affair or substance abuse, or something tangible like that, versus just growing apart and just growing out of love, and whether or not they actually want to work on the marriage or they want to get divorced?
Well, people who are in an affair, there's this whole term called limerence. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
So limerence is this place you get into when you are so super hyper infatuated with someone that you would act out of character. Like it's like a love addiction, right? They're obsessed, and in their minds, they're willing to throw it all away for the secretary or the tennis coach. I see all kinds of that. Those make me crazy personally. Those drive me nuts because you can't reach them. They're an addict. So affairs are tough. They're tough for that reason, because there's another person in the element in the equation. And if they're not willing to let go of that, and a lot of them aren't in the beginning, especially, it makes it tough. But we just see a lot of people come in and they tell me they're incompatible. They fight a lot. They feel lonely in their marriages. And those are the ones I really love to get, because compatibility has nothing to do with whether or not you can have a happy marriage. If you are compatible in the core values, meaning my husband doesn't rob banks for a living, because I would think that that's a terrible moral decision, right? As long as we agree on those kinds of things, like if you're Catholic and religion's really important to you, you probably don't want to marry an atheist. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm. The rest of it, man, that's the spark and excitement, right? That's what makes people really have some kind of something unique, because the whole point of marriage, really, in my opinion, is to grow us up. And if I'm married to somebody who's really easy to get along with and doesn't push and pull against me, I lose the opportunity to grow myself up. But sometimes if I don't want to grow up, or I don't have the skills or the tools to do that, I'm going to fight it. And I'm going to not want to be in the marriage. But boy, are we missing an opportunity to grow.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you know what? Before you come see a divorce attorney or divorce coach like me, you need to go see Kim, and hopefully you can work on your marriage. And
love that. Or at least find out if you want to work on your marriage. The value of that is, by the time you see a divorce attorney, you want to be clear that you've done all you can do, so that you don't come back in 2 years or 5 years and have so much regret.
I think that's absolutely correct. And some people just think about divorce for so long, they almost convince themselves it's the only option. And there a lot of times is another option. So Kim, you work with people all over the country and the world. So how would someone contact you if they want to work with you?
The easiest way to reach us is to go to the website, www.themarriageplace.com. You can fill out a contact form. You can call us directly. You can text, and that somebody will answer your text. So those are pretty much the easiest ways to get in touch with us.
And they're going to get a nice, lovely, long intake form to...
Yes.
Which probably is very cathartic anyway, filling out this long form.
Well, before they even get there, they have the option of having a discovery call with somebody on the team who knows what we offer and knows what an ideal client looks like. And I think that's a lot less threatening than call us up and we'll send you a 20-page document to fill out, right? So it's just a discovery call. It's free. It just gives them a chance to find out if we're a good fit.
So you've got nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Kim.
I appreciate it. I actually have enjoyed this, John. Thanks for the opportunity.
Glad to hear it. All right. See everyone next time.